All right. Well, welcome all. My name is Dave Komisky. I'm actually going to hand things off right away to Marcy from the NAVC to quickly tell you all about, if you're not familiar, about the Veterinary Innovation Summit and why we're doing these fireside chats.
Great. Well, thanks, Dave, and welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to have you here and hope to see you all at Veterinary Innovation Summit in Kansas City towards the end of August, August 27th through the 29th. And the Veterinary Innovation Summit is in its fourth year. We took a hiatus in 2020 for the pandemic. Traditionally, we have always held BIS at Texas A&M. But we have since moved it under the purview of the Veterinary Innovation Council, which we're very excited about. And the Veterinary Innovation Council, VIC, will sponsor VIS going forward. And this year, we just happen to be collaborating with NAVC's Media E-Commerce Summit. So if you've had a chance to look at the program, you'll see that the 3-day event is action-packed. The content is amazing. Literally, I think the who's who in the veterinary profession today is either speaking or participating in some way. And once again, I hope you can join. And if you have any specific questions about VIS, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Marcy. So I'll quickly, I'd like to just quickly sort of share a little bit of information with you all about the Pet Care Innovation Prize. We're working with Marcy and the VIS this year to support their startup pitch competition and really elevate the innovation angle, especially amongst the startups and the emerging companies at the conference happening in just under a month. So the Pet Care Innovation Prize is a competition powered by Purina. Annually, each year, we award 5 innovative startups in the pet care industry, non-dilutive cash grants, and those winners also sort of reap the benefits of access, connections, and business lessons from inside Purina and all that accompanies. The Pet Care Innovation Prize has been around for 5 years, and the founders who have won that prize now make up the Pet Care Innovation Network. We have about 30 founders in the network currently, and that network is growing each year. The application for the 2022 prize opened just a day ago. So if you visit petcareinnovation.net, and if you have a startup in the space, you can apply from now until the end of September. So that's the Pet Care Innovation Prize. But without further ado, I wanted to hand things over to our speaker tonight, Sarah Cutler Tew from IDEXX. She's going to be speaking about claims, credibility, and regulation, which as a former founder, knowing some of the things that my company claimed, I found extremely relevant the first time I talked to Sarah, and I'm very excited for this conversation. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dave, and thank you, Marcy, for giving us this opportunity to really connect with the startup community in our veterinary industry. We all had the opportunity to sit down, and IDEXX is thrilled to co-sponsor the VIS startup pitch with the Pet Care Innovation Prize and Dave's team this year. And we thought, what else can we do to add value and really connect with all of you? And so thrilled and again, very honored that you've all taken an hour of what's probably your evening, depending on what time zone you're in, to join us and have this chat tonight. So I am going to only use slides if I absolutely have to. I'd rather be able to talk to all of you, and we'd like to make this a little bit interactive. So primarily we'll focus on regulations and claims in the US market. For those of you who are looking to launch outside the US, I'd love to know if anybody is looking at either Canada or Europe or Asia for their new products. And there is a reaction button below, or you can give me a thumbs up. All right.
Oh, we've got one, two,
We've got three.
three.
All right. So I've got Susan, David, and Addie. I'll start with you, Addie. Where is your company looking to launch?
So eventually, Europe and Australia.
Oh, Australia is very fun. Okay. David, how about you?
Yeah, first launch in the United States after heading to the South Korea and Japan.
I have good friends there. I really miss visiting. I can't wait to get back on a plane. And Susan, how about you?
Launched in the US and looking into, I have the patent in Canada and looking into Australia as well. And then over into Europe, Asia, all over.
Okay. These are good scopes to have. So I'd like to, and then ask a second question. And this is around what kind of startups are represented for us today? Is anyone looking to launch a therapeutic or pharmaceutical product? Raise your hands. Real ones, if you're on video, works too. Okay, how about a diagnostic? A device? Okay, we've got David with a device. Software. Hardware. Vaccines. Okay, so I think we're gonna do a quick round robin so you guys can tell me what you're doing. And Susan, I think you might fall into the device category, given your background.
Oh, you're muted right now, Susan.
Okay, I'm going to go in order of my screen. So Addie, I'm starting with you again.
So the question is just what area?
Yeah, what kind of product is your startup focusing on?
Yeah. So I have a mentorship and professional development program for veterinarians. So it's service.
Awesome.
Services. Yeah, services.
Renee, how about you? Oh shoot, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Is that better?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a double mute on my mic. So we have a passive GPS. We use that technology through QR codes to get animals home, mainly through licensing, but also looking at other aspects of how that can be used for pets and their families.
Are you looking to work through an app with a device, a mix of the two?
We have a full website.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. And Bruce, are you just here to cause us to sweat as the peanut gallery or representing a startup today?
Hi, everybody. So there are a couple of startups that I'm advising. One is Pettegrity. So that's really just a platform for insurance marketplace and some back-end tech that integrates with the practice software. So that's domestic. And then I'm working with BasePaws, which is a product that I think everybody's familiar with. And really, when you ask the question about global expansion, I wouldn't call it a startup, but my main project is working on fear-free global expansion. So we've got all this pent-up demand in other countries for the platform, and we have to figure out how to license it into these other countries.
Awesome. Keely, and I hope I'm saying your name right.
Yeah, yep. So I'm Keely. I'm actually a veterinary student working at a startup company called Vetted. We are a preventative healthcare kit sent to your door monthly, along with an online platform for learning materials, a virtual vet professional advice chat, and then we also include in our subscription a reimbursement services of preventative health services at your veterinarian's office.
Wow, there's a lot there. Can you share what's in your kit?
Yeah, so our kit includes some drop shipped preventatives, so heartworm preventatives and flea and tick preventatives, whatever you've been getting from your vet to your door. And then our kit that's sent monthly includes some ear cleaning products, with nail clippers. It includes a diagnostic fecal test you can send in. It also includes toothbrush and toothpaste, and then also some learning materials in it.
So you could have raised your hand for every category I
Yeah,
listed.
I was like, I think all of them, but all the above at the end.
We'll have fun with that one. David, how about you?
Yeah, I'm very similar with the Vetted, but we are mobility service for the pet. Our main focus is the mobile vet lab. We're gonna have a test using the IDEXX, like a 4DX or just diagnostic device, and we will visit their home or office and get a liquid biopsy and take that to our laboratory or drop at your IDEXX laboratory, and we'll store their medical record. And when they visit to the veterinary, then we're gonna share with them. That is our main business model.
Okay, so you've got diagnostics and electronic patient records, and you've got some great
right.
privacy concerns in there. That's a fun one too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we need to take care about that. Yeah.
And again, apologies if I have any mispronunciation, but Janae?
Yeah, it's Janae. I'm Janae. I'm the founder and the CEO of Interplay, and we're creating an IoT product that allows dog owners to remotely control their dog's crating experience.
Okay. Very cool. And good elevator pitch there. You've been practicing.
Yeah, that was incredibly concise, and everyone was like, yeah.
Well done. And Susan, we know you have Critier. Again, great representation on your background.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, well, it doesn't need a lot of introduction. It's dog earplugs, literally. Dog, a little bit smaller than that, though.
Not to take us off track, but I have to ask, when they shake their heads, they don't come out?
Okay, so very good question, because it's asked a lot. They are anatomically, they are made anatomically correct for the dog's ear, for the vertical and the horizontal one. So when you pull up the ear, how it elongates it, you put it in and it bends and it gets caught in that little notch, the elbow of the ear canals. And there is some training involved, of course, because you're sticking something in their ear and they don't like it. But if you use something of high value cheese, high value bribery, it works wonders with these, and they don't even feel them because they're soft.
Oh, very cool. So
dogs can't fear what they can't hear.
That's also a great tagline.
I love that.
This is a great example of a device. And interesting things about devices and regulation in the US in particular is it's technically under the FDA, but it's not actively regulated by the FDA. And so that creates an entirely different category, which I'll tell you a very short horror story, which is if you have a device and you wish to register it with the FDA, they will ask you whether it's a food or a drug. And when you say, but it's a device, they will then ask you again if it's a food or a drug. And there is a story of once a fish hook was classified as a food because it had to be one or the other. So when you do have a veterinary device, if you are not making medical claims, so let's say, for example, Susan had a clinical study that showed that her device was effective in preventing otic infections in Labradors who like to spend too much time in ponds. That would be a medical claim. Prevention of an infection would be a medical claim. Mm-hmm. So if you worded it that way, the FDA would be quite unhappy with you for making a medical claim about your unregistered device, which of course you can't register as a device because it's not a human device. And so there are ways when you make your marketing claims to get that point across without running afoul of our regulatory agencies. But you have to be very careful, again, not to make medical claims. So thank you for example number one, Susan. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And that's really interesting. So we say veterinarian recommended, not approved, not, recommended. Because it has been by our board vet, but we're just very careful of the claims that you were talking about.
Great. Now, let's say you had a veterinarian run across a publication on this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bruce.
I think you were going exactly where I was going. I was just going to share with the group that I worked on an HbA1c dry blood spot test, and the legal opinion was you couldn't get it registered, but what the veterinary community wants is what I believe you were going to say is the published and peer-reviewed study to validate it. And if you don't have that, the key opinion leader community will not endorse it. That's a critical component.
That is absolutely true. So having those clinical studies or controlled studies for those of us who are working in the software or the services space to show valid differentiation is really important. And an exception that the FDA makes in the veterinary space are vet-to-vet conversations. So Susan, let's say you had a study out there about my completely imaginary prevention of ear infections, and a veterinarian wanted to ask about it. They could have an open conversation about your data without it being a claims issue with another veterinarian.
Okay.
So an example that's sort of one of our go-tos in the pharmaceutical space is Previcox. So Previcox is an NSAID that is approved for use in canines. It also can be used in other species. So if I had a veterinarian ask one of the Boehringer Ingelheim veterinarians, what is the appropriate dose of Previcox in horses? They could answer that question. If they asked a non-veterinarian, we would not be able to answer the question. We would have to refer them to having a vet-to-vet discussion. But so you can have those discussions and talk about what we would broadly think of as claims in a clinical context. And to get that belief within the veterinary community, you need the clinical studies, as Bruce was saying.
Very, very, very good stuff here. Thank you.
Years of being a nerd, you accumulate all this great knowledge, and I'm appreciative that there are others who want to know it. So next up on my screen is Mr. Bernard. Give him a second. Come off mute. Bernard? Okay, we come back around.
Yeah.
Yep. For my next up on the Hollywood Squares here, I don't have your first name, so it's E. Green.
Yeah, it's Eleanor Green.
Oh goodness, Eleanor.
Veterinary
Hello.
Innovation Council. Sorry, so I'm just kind of lurking and listening and enjoying what everyone's saying.
Well, if I had known it was you, I would have said hello. Lovely to have you with us.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's hope that
Sarah, if I may, all of you should know that VIC, or Veterinary Innovation Summit, is Eleanor's brainchild. So Eleanor is the creator behind Veterinary Innovation Summit and is the vice chair on the VIC board. And so when we had the opportunity to work together, it was just amazing. So Eleanor, I'm so glad you're here, and thank you for lurking. This is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And I have to also credit Adam Little. He's just been awesome in the Innovation Summit from its inception. So yeah, thank you.
And
Marcy's doing a great job supporting it, so we're going to keep it going. Thank you.
Marcy is amazing, and can we still call you Dean Green for the rest of time?
You know, Eleanor works best.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Kay Robinson.
Hi, my name's Katie. I'm a veterinarian and kind of just in the peanut gallery, interested to kind of learn a little bit more about this part of the veterinary space. And sorry, my daughter just came inside from blowing bubbles, so there's a little background noise, but it's exciting to hear everything you all are saying and learn more.
Blowing bubbles is wonderful. And Edna May, who has been an associate of mine for a very long time through some very fortunate overlaps in the industry. She's a recent graduate of Cornell, so congrats to her for finishing this year. And Edna, are you representing any of the myriad things you've worked on over the last couple of years, or hanging out with us
It's
today?
funny that I think I'm just like one of your biggest fans. So I wanted to join, and I love hearing all these ideas already. So it just seems exciting to listen in. So yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Here for that.
We appreciate it. For those of you who have never interacted with the Cornell Hackathon before, Edna has been an absolute driving force for that event, which has grown incredibly during her tenure at Cornell, and some really cool ideas come out of that too. It's open nationwide now in our new virtual setting, so keep an eye out for that in January.
Very cool.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about regulatory networks for a minute, and then we'll dive in. So ground rules, please interrupt me. I love to have conversation. That's what we're here for today, is for this to be relevant to you, and also to, give you ideas and help prepare you for both the upcoming BIAH and anything else that comes your way in this startup universe. So in the US, there are not one, not two, but 3 regulatory agencies for veterinary products, which makes it very fun. We'll keep going with fun for all of us. So the EPA regulates all parasiticides. So these are your flea and tick control products. And specifically your topical flea and tick control products, as well as your pour-on products to control different kinds of parasites and pests in cattle and livestock. So this is your Advantage, Advantix, Frontline, and Ivomec products. The EPA considers all of these products to be poisons, every single last one of them, which means you can't say they're safe. Going back to, and here's our overarching theme for the day, just because it's true doesn't mean you can always say it in a marketing context. And so in this case, you could have evidence that a newborn could drink 4 gallons of a given product, but if it's used to put on a cat or a dog to kill fleas or ticks, it's a parasiticide and you cannot call it safe. So then we have the FDA, and the FDA is kind of the behemoth in the room here. So Food and Drug Administration, which means they're covering foods and feeds, and there's an affiliation there to AAFCO. Now, nobody here is really talking about ingestibles, so we won't spend too much time on that, but I'm happy to answer questions. AAFCO is not officially part of the FDA, but they are very, very closely associated with them. And in some ways, you could broadly say that the FDA has chartered AAFCO to regulate the details of that part of certain aspects of that part of the industry of what you look at for ingredient lists. So when you see AAFCO certified on the side of, your standard sort of dogs and cat foods, this doesn't necessarily always apply to treats, but it can. So we'll get into treats and supplements in a little bit because there's some differentiation there. When in doubt, great to be AAFCO certified, highly, highly preferred, especially if you're talking to the veterinary industry. There's also some safety standards that are wrapped into that. Then there's the drugs and devices. So we've already conveniently talked a lot about devices. And the drugs are your pharmaceutical drugs. These are sometimes therapeutics, because there can be therapeutics that are considered supplements, but anything that is registered with the FDA that you need a prescription to get. Now, there are things that are registered with the FDA. Capstar is a great example, which you no longer need a prescription to get. And then just to make it fuzzier, we have our prescription diets. So technically, if you need a renal diet from Hills or Purina or Royal Canin, there's a veterinary line, as we all probably have experienced. And then there's the over-the-counter line. And those are not technically registered with the FDA, but they do have control in how they're released. Again, not directly related to anyone here, but when you're thinking about your pet owner, when you're thinking about your veterinary customers, the nutrition space gets to be really, really interesting. And so learning about in that preventive care segment, You know, when we start looking at, well, what about nutraceuticals? What about supplements? What about starting animals on diets earlier? If your diagnostic results in your mobile clinic come back as being a little too interesting, that's a conversation to have with the veterinarian. And those particular veterinary diets do require a prescription and are regulated by the FDA. And then we have the USDA. So USDA regulates vaccines and antibiotics. And if you have a approved product with the USDA, you can market it as safe, pure, and effective. So that can make it pretty challenging to compete against another safe, pure, and effective vaccine. And that's where you start seeing what delve into marketing claims. So things like half the volume, right? And there are levels of claims that are approved by all of these different agencies, which give you your label claims. And your label claims will be a document that is also publicly available. If you go to fda.gov or epa.gov or usda.gov, you can look up almost anything and find out what their label claims are and what has been approved. If you want to diverge from that, then we start to talk about marketing claims and competitive claims. And so you would think regulatory is pretty cut and dried. This is not always the case. And so it can get a little fuzzy as to which one is which, where we're talking about things like superiority claims. Superiority claims are almost always a marketing claim, but I'll give you an example. I have 2 treats, and I want to say that my treat tastes better than this other treat. And I can do a palatability study, again, going back to our second theme of the day, which Bruce brought up so nicely, is you have to have true studies to do things, to say dogs ate my treat 5 times more often than they ate this other treat. So that's a marketing claim. But if you misrepresent your data, the regulatory agency that is managing your product can still send you an unwritten letter. An unwritten letter. Can still send you a letter and say that you are misbranding, mislabeling, or misrepresenting your product. Because there is an expectation by the customer, the pet owner, and the veterinarian that what you're saying is true and accurate. So that's where these oversight agencies come in. Now, that might lead you to the question of, and sorry for my dog in the background, clearly there's a leaf falling somewhere and it's a major threat. What about all these companies and all these products that say like out of this world, we'll call it the stuff, out of this world stuff, you know, if you take this supplement, it will solve all your kidney health problems, or cranberry will eliminate urinary tract infections. As medical professionals, that's a little iffy. And so to some degree, given the volume of companies out there, they have to be big enough to hit the radar to get something like an official notice from one of the regulatory agencies. You're much more likely to be sued by one of your competitors. So having that data to back up what you're saying is very, very helpful. So let's talk about the services side for a second. So Addie, tell us a little bit more about what you're planning to offer.
Yeah, so my program is called MentorVet. We just launched our first large cohort a couple of days ago. It's a 5-month mentorship and professional development program specifically targeted at recent veterinary graduates transitioning into practice. So it connects them with a lot of different resources, training, education, and professional skills so that they're better prepared to cope with the stressors of practice. Because as many of you guys know, the vet profession is really stressful. We have pretty high rate of suicide in the profession. So this program is aims to really hopefully promote well-being in the transition of practice. So yeah, I did some research over the past 2 years at University of Kentucky, just developing this program and working and partnering with Merck Animal Health to grow and expand it. So yeah, it's mainly online education as well as some small group Zoom meetings, peer group meetings, and connects them to resources like financial coaching, mental health coaching, and paired mentorship.
That sounds awesome. So do you have advertisers?
So I'm working with Merck on developing a lot of marketing materials. So they have graciously partnered with me to kind of grow and expand the program. So we're currently working with their marketing team to develop some materials and move it through regulatory processes and things like that.
So how's that experience for you? Because Merck, as you know, has the whole gamut of FDA, USDA, EPA, not to mention Health Canada. And then I will touch on Europe before we close today for sure. So talk about their review process.
It's just slow. It's very slow. Yes. So a lot of the things, like I started back in March partnering with them. My program launched a few days ago, and it was so slow that we couldn't get anything developed prior to the launch of the program, just what I had already done on my own. And so there was really no marketing materials and nothing really that we could distribute to any kind of written thing. So it was all email communication with different partners and I'm surprised we got 80 veterinarians in this first cohort. So I'm really impressed by our ability to even get it out to that many people with very, very little marketing done. So
that is awesome. So one of my jobs in the past,
That's a question.
oh yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
Susan, I was just going to share that your experience is very common, and like 6 to 8 weeks, maybe even 12 weeks to get something through a legal and regulatory process is what you should expect. And don't get frustrated about it, because that's just the reality of it. But it helps you plan way out when you're working with a big pharmaceutical company to get it done. And I've worked with people over the years where, it's taken that long or sometimes longer if it gets sent back for revisions. And Sarah, I think that's probably what you were going to say again too. So I'm sorry. I'm stepping on your feet here.
No, you're not. We're just clearly on the same wavelength, Bruce. If only we had planned this in advance, we could have done a soft shoe with it. It would have been awesome. So I worked for Marielle, which is a company that no longer officially exists after a few acquisitions. And one of my jobs was to do the technical review of all our advertising, promotion, marketing, training materials. Great nerd job. That's really where I learned all of the ins and outs of the regulatory network. And we each reviewed about 2,000 items a year. So and that was on the companion animal side, right? So the volume is huge. And this was a great segue into all of those small companies. We'll say those other small companies, because clearly we have a lot of diligence in this group who say whatever they want. They're below the radar. The big pharmaceutical companies are distinctly not. And so when you do have a credibility issue, whether it's with a competitor or whether it's with one of the regulatory agencies, you're looking at a few things. Untitled letters, not unwritten letters, untitled letters, which go on, we'll call it your permanent federal record, fines, lawsuits. None of those are fun. And they can also relate directly to a reputational damage that can be hard to quantify, but can cost 6-7 figures in sales, right? Depending on what it is. And so the bigger the company, you'll have a ton of resources as a partner, and you can also really get fantastic exposure, but it is going to take more time because you will see more risk aversion in that space, and for good reason. The other piece about that is, let's say, just for fun, for some reason your materials reference Previcox. Okay, so Merck product, great Merck product. Flea and tick control, fun thing, not EPA, FDA, because it works systemically and not topically. So flea and tick control products can fall into both categories. If something else in the materials caught the eye of a regulatory agent and Previcox was mentioned, it could give them a reason to write a letter against Previcox. The same way, if you're going to update your claims, you want to consider sort of your regulatory environment, because that can also, okay, let's fast forward. It's 20 years from now, you're all smashing successes and you want to make a small change to one of your claims. So David, let's say that in addition to your mobile service, you've actually developed some diagnostics as well. And let's say that it's an ELISA based, so like the 4DX you mentioned, so it's an ELISA based test, which means that unlike some of the diagnostics that we talk about, those SNAP tests and other ELISA based tests are regulated by the USDA because that's an antibody product and you want to make a change to it. They can reopen the entire dossier, and something that was approved 2 years from now might not be approved 20 years from now. And that changes a lot of marketing. So the other thing you'll see, especially in big pharmaceutical companies with pioneer products, is that there may be a reluctance to add new claims and instead go the route of clinical studies and white papers and having those vet to vet discussions instead of getting an actual label claim, because it can put the rest of the dossier at risk because of changing attitudes. Now, if there is a real safety issue or a real efficacy issue, of course you revisit those label claims and you revisit those dossiers. But sometimes it's an attitude change, and sometimes, frankly, depending on the agency, it can be a reviewer change. You can have a reviewer who likes something and then a reviewer who does not. And I'll take this out of the FDA, EPA, USDA range to give you an example in the dental world. So there's an organization called the Veterinary Oral Health Council, the VOHC, and it was run by one guy for a couple of decades. Bruce, you might know Colin Harvey, and he was the czar of veterinary dental. In fact, he was the founder of the field of veterinary dentistry, and he was from the UK. And he made while there was definitely a council and there was definitely a board and they were all boarded vet dentists, he made all of the decisions on whether or not a product could get an extension, if you changed out an ingredient, was it still okay? What kind of bioequivalence would you need to show? All of those were made independently by Colin. When Colin retired, it changed. Everything changed. And so if you had a decision by Colin that you wanted to get revisited, you would have to redo all your studies, potentially, at $50K each, I say from personal experience. So it all came out okay. Oravet has the VOHC seal, and I worked very hard for that, for the record. So legitimate, great studies. So you do want to have the future in mind when you write your claims, and you do want to keep an eye on your competitive environment when you write them as well. And keep in mind that you really can leverage that veterinary voice and well-written clinical protocols to support what your product does, whether it's a product, a service, a platform. All of these things really do count. So I've been talking an awful lot, which is part of the job here, but I think it's your turn. So I'd love to hear any questions, any thoughts before I talk a little bit about Canada and Europe.
I'm curious if you all have thought, Janae, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, I had a question about what do you think is the best way to approach getting your product backed by a veterinarian?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a good one. So proof. There's a few things here, but the number one thing has to be an evidence-based reason for them to back your product. And sometimes that's, how does it, and I'll use an example that's not a product, but that is more of a service. So how would a new practice management system make their life easier? How would it increase efficiency in their clinic? And you have to show them, not just tell them, that that might be the case. have you done a pilot for, not you, but in that world, have you done a pilot? And then the question is, how do you recruit people for pilots, of course? But if we're looking at how to reach the veterinarian, they need a reason to believe, and it's either got to enhance their ability to practice medicine, improve the quality of the medicine that they can deliver and the care that they can deliver to their patients, improve the experience and the retention of their healthcare team. So we have an incredible crisis, frankly, in the number of veterinary professionals we have to meet the needs of pets in the US, much less other parts of the world. So how can we more effectively utilize all of the expertise that we have? And that's true for each veterinarian in their practice as well. So they need proof. It has to be scientifically approached and evidence-based. Yes,
Sarah,
sir.
I would add something to that for those folks that have non-regulated products. Alignment with the key opinion leader community is really important. So if your product isn't regulated, so therefore you don't necessarily have to produce, evidence that it's efficacious, through a peer-reviewed publication. If you can't go down that path, if the key opinion leaders in the space, you meet with them, identify them, and then meet with them, and they endorse your product, that really helps. And doing webinars with them, sometimes using some of the publication companies in the space where you can pay to access their database, they'll do it for you, and email out and do a webinar with somebody that's really well known. That really helps. And if you can get that webinar RACE approved, and it just depends on your product, but if you can submit it to this group called RACE, and that therefore it counts towards CE for the people on the webinar, that really helps boost attendance.
And so if we think about your product with the crating experience, what are you trying to solve for with your product?
We're trying to primarily ease the lives of busy dog owners, and then also hopefully reduce separation anxiety within dogs due to their dog owners' frequent absence.
So from that perspective, two different pathways come immediately to mind, and I'm sure everyone else here can add another 20. But one is people are going back to work after the pandemic. There's an incredible stress about both the experience of the pet owner and the experience of the pets. And in some cases, this is creating a spike in pet returns to shelters, which are not equipped to handle them. So this is both an emotional as well as an animal welfare concern. And so can you partner with behaviorists that are talking about how to manage the transition back to work and back to even social lives and going to kids' baseball games, and I left the dog alone for 3 hours and he ate the couch. So behaviorists are a key piece of this, and behavior management, when we look at potential partnerships with other companies that have complementary products like, and I do not work for SIVA, I'm not plugging this, but Adaptil and Feliway, which are calming pheromones for pets. They have great clinical evidence behind them. They have a KOL network. You might be able to work with them or tap into that. And they happen to have online webinars that I know about, because we're all really invested in how to help educate on this pet return challenge. See who's speaking for them. Reach out to them. And then you want to, in this case, when we say, have evidence behind how does this change the experience for the pet and the pet owner? How does it reduce potential anxiety or behavior problems on either side of that equation? And what's led you to that conclusion that your technology is a solution in this space? And then those are also the people who could partner with you on these observational studies. Not all studies are clinical, as I said. Sometimes it's in the education space. Let's have 50 people experience this program and give us feedback. How did it move the needle on their confidence as a new practitioner? How did it move the needle on their their sense of stress or anxiety or comfort levels with different elements of new practitioner veterinary applications. You know, did they start out not comfortable in infectious disease, and now that they feel much more confident in having that customer conversation? Do they feel as though they can communicate with pet owners in a more effective way? So you can still measure things even if you're not measuring scientific data, if that makes sense. And those are critical going back to your claims. So it's your credibility with the practitioner, with the KOLs who will actually amplify the credibility you have to the practitioner. And it also allows you to have a stronger market presence when it comes to eventually we all have competition for something. And so you can back up what you're saying in the face of other products that may be similar or aim to accomplish a similar aim. I said aim twice in that sentence. So for example, Jonay, I mean, that's a huge concern right now. And the other place that you can really leverage and meet KOLs are at things, not a plug on purpose, at like BIS. This is where there will be people from industry, from academia, serial entrepreneurs like Bruce, who I think I've seen in every meeting for the last 10 years, always working with different really cool things. And you make these connections, and that network allows you to connect the dots to new KOLs, to organizations who might be invested in animal welfare. So the shelter organizations might be another great way for you to connect. And there are shelter veterinarians who would be KOLs as well, and talk to them about how does your product help keep animals in the home and out of the shelters? And then I can see actually some partnerships that could form among this group. How do you educate pet owners to understand what training is, what the behavioral needs are, how this helps? You need to be able to speak to all levels of your audience.
Does anyone else have any other questions? I'm curious if I can ask a question of the group. Have you thought about sort of I imagine at this point, sort of most of it's around marketing claims. Have you thought about the marketing claims that you're making, and how to substantiate them and what risks they might potentially bring you down the road, out of curiosity? Because I never did.
We definitely do, because it's a new product in a new space. So it gets attention, and people pay attention to the claims that we are making. So we are very aware of everything that we blog about, write about, every word, because it's important to me that it is legit, not just selling a product.
Yeah, that's great.
So Susan, I think you're planning on being at WPA, right?
Yes, I'm first time on the floor. So yes.
So that's another interesting opportunity to think about in a startup environment, is what are the different venues that your audience or your consumers are going to be attending? Because it really is understanding, and I think Sarah said it extremely well, is who's your audience and how are you going to solve their problem? So a veterinary audience is going to be very different than a pet owner audience, and ensuring that your elevator speech is for the intended audience, right? It's not a one size fits all. And how you speak to them is going to be very different because they're coming at it from different points of view and their needs are different. So, you know, Janae, if you're talking to, let's say, Jim Tedford at the Advancement of Animal Welfare Association, right? His desire or his outcome is going to be very different than maybe talking to a behaviorist, right? Because, or a generalist veterinarian. So it's really understanding who your audience is and then looking at different venues where you can meet those people and question them about what is it that will make their life better? Because that's what it all comes down to, right? Is you got to make things easier for them as a pet owner in the long run.
Absolutely. Gosh, your knowledge, yours and Sarah's, everybody, it's just what I wish I could download it and take it all in.
That's why we're recording.
Yeah, I like that. Rewind.
Yep, right.
And I love the idea of partnerships. You know, Addie's already doing this, and there are sometimes downsides like 12-week, 14-week lead times, but take advantage of the networks for companies and organizations, especially the organizations who have an interest in the same area. And so, you know, you said it well, and Susan, I can't repeat it. You're not afraid of what you can't hear.
You can't fear what you can't hear.
See, you can't fear what you can't hear. So that same idea of partnering with companies that are addressing anxiety and behavior, and there are several products on the market now. I know Verbac, Siva, and Zoetis all have things, and they address the problem or the challenge in different ways. You know, can you, again, I'm making things up, but it would be fun. So can you set up an at-home trial with some of your users where they have your product and a pheromone collar, and see if that really shifts even if it's, you know, self-reported owner perception needs to be taken with a grain of salt, but that experience absolutely counts, especially if you set up the reporting so that it takes some of the bias out of it, which people can help you with. And, you know, people volunteer to help people with, because it's all about sharing the knowledge and, again, advancing within the industry and getting more care and more knowledge at all levels of the pet owner to veterinary spectrum. So education is a huge piece of each one of the things that you've all brought forward, and trying to fill gaps that we identify in the daily lives of the animals that it's hard to even say are more and more like children now. I think we've already passed the event horizon in a lot of areas of the country. So we have just a few minutes, very broadly, and I'm happy to follow up with anyone. I'm on LinkedIn. I even check it most days. I'm not the most online person, but I'm trying really hard. Please connect with me. Happy to chat. But places like Australia, importation is really interesting. Your ingredients and your materials are going to be looked at very, very, very closely. The same goes with Asia, but with, I'm going to say, different filters. These are things that you can do some research on your own, but if you're really seriously launching in one of these markets, it's worth contracting with an expert in the space. It'll save you a lot of money, time, and tears in the long run. I did once have a product that we legitimately considered flying in to meet a deadline overnight because we couldn't get it released from customs in a country I will not name. So nothing. And so the other thing, you know, and this is changing, but there are countries where there's a list of ingredients you can't have in a product. And as long as you don't have those, you can bring it in, you can sell it, no problem. That is the regulatory process. So you have a vast spectrum. In Europe, you have the option to either go for centralized registration or country by country registration. That really needs to align with both your competitive environment as well as with your market strategy. If your main launch is really going, and this was pre-UK, so that's going to throw a really fun wrench in the works. I've said fun a lot today because I do think this is fun. But if you really are looking at the UK, Germany, and France, which is where a lot of the main sales are given the, I'm going to say, the continuum of care across European countries, it may be worthwhile to start with those 3 countries instead of going through centralized registration that can take a whole lot longer. Doesn't apply to most of the people here, but as entrepreneurs, you never know where you're going to go with your future state. You do have to do significantly different field trials in Europe than you do in the US, which is something to keep in mind as you look at your timelines and your budget going forward and when you want to try to enter those markets. Health Canada is not a copy paste of US regulations. And so they also have a list of ingredients and components that they just don't allow. And it's some that we take for granted as regular use. So working with someone who has specific expertise in the countries you're looking at from a customs and import standpoint and a regulation standpoint will do you a world of good. Told you OUS would be quick today.
Sarah, I got to hop off because I had a hard stop, but I just want to tell you what a great job you did and really want to thank you. So
Thank
it's
you,
great
Eleanor.
to see you.
I appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Sarah. This has been terrific. I want to just remind everyone that this is the first of 3 of these fireside chats. We have our next one scheduled for next Tuesday, August 3rd. And while on this call, I realized that the Eventbrite says Tuesday, August 3rd, but the date when you select that says Thursday, August 5th. So I'll send an email out to everyone who has registered for the second fireside chat. It's going to be a really great one. One of Sarah's old colleagues, I think, Nakia Stark-Jones from Beringer Ingelheim, if I said that right, is going to be joining us to talk about bringing products to market, which is a very exciting topic, I'm sure, for all of us.
Nakia's phenomenal. You guys will absolutely love her. We were partners in crime to launch many products together. Thank you all for your time. It was a pleasure to meet everybody here today and see some familiar faces as well. And I hope to see you all again, maybe even in person.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Okay.
Sarah.
Bye.